I appreciate the introduction. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm grateful to Seth and Joanna for doing this with me. Seth, that was some really incredible food for thought for me. I don't often spend a lot of time thinking about what this looks like in a context that is not an Indigenous community context. And I think when I think about the path to climate leadership for our communities, we are experiencing emergency fatigue, whether it's clean drinking water, environmental racism, land theft, birth alerts, medical racism, suicide rates, the theft of our children in the foster care system. Like, we are surrounded by emergencies all the time. And so as I share a little bit about what climate leadership looks like here, it might be a bit of a different message, but I really appreciate that there's lots of alignment as well with many of the good words you were sharing. So as Catherine mentioned, my name is Shiwagilauch. My borrowed name is Jess Housty. I am a citizen of the Heiltsuk Nation, and I live in my unceded ancestral homelands in Bella Bella, British Columbia. I am a descendant of the East State people through my late grandfather and the Hoyot people through my grandmother. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about a charitable nonprofit in our community. So Cox Project Societies, it's a Heiltsuk charitable nonprofit. We were founded in 1999 at the behest of our chiefs and matriarchs of the day, who were observing in our community that as we were experiencing the first generations in which children were not being forcibly removed to residential schools, that we had a lot of hard work to do to grapple with that trauma and to learn how to be families again, how to function as a community again. We were beginning to take back control of local institutions like our community school, our health center, but there was so much deep pain after generations of fractured families and generations of people who had been regulated off our territory and away from their culture, who had lived through the potlatch ban and been unable to safely or legally connect with culture and ceremony. And the net result of all of those impacts in the community was really deep pain that was leading to high suicide rates, lots of social dysfunction. And through the wisdom of our elders of the day, they felt very strongly that the best way for our community and our families to heal was by reconnecting to our culture and being back out on our territory. And so the early roots of Cox as an organization are really part of that deep response to the community of saying, we are not people who want to be in pain. We want to be people who are in our power, and our power comes from our culture, it comes from our land. And so reflected across all of our programs is this really deep belief that if we can get our youth and families and community members outside, on the land, on the water, living their cultural identity, feeling safe and strong and secure in it, that we will be supporting the kind of leadership and growth and healing that our community really deserves. If you can go to the next slide, please. I want to acknowledge that I do not do this work alone. I have recently stepped into the role of executive director at our organization, and there is an incredible team of people who are the real champions of what we do. In particular, you can see in this slide here, Clea Schooner and Vanita Stegman, who are the heart and soul of our office and the only reason I actually get anything done. We have a core staff of about 15 people who work with us year round, and seasonally we bring on about 25 additional staff members who run land-based programs for youth. The vast majority of our staff are Heiltsuk people, often who come to us very early in their careers, often in their teens, often growing out of our program participant roles into leadership roles in our programs as part of a really deep commitment to long-term investment in people that we have. And the important thing for us is that people can see reflected in our programs that leadership comes from within our community. We have what we need to survive and to thrive. And I'm incredibly proud of the team that we have at Cox that helps to make some of this magic happen. If you can go to the next slide, please. I just want to share a little bit about our governance and our approach. And you can see on this slide 3 incredible Heiltsuk women who are part of our board of directors. Our entire board of directors is made up actually of incredible women who represent different partners in the community. So they come from different agencies like Kakla Child and Family Services, Heiltsuk Tribal Council, Social Development. We have chiefs and matriarchs, representatives from our health center, because the work that we do is not just non-competitive, it needs to be deeply collaborative if we're going to make change. We want to be breaking down silos and making sure that our community is holding all of us accountable to delivering the kind of really deep, holistic wraparound services that they deserve. You know, it's a bit of a struggle for me sometimes when I'm interacting with folks in the nonprofit sector who are not working in an Indigenous community context, because it feels like the way things operate a lot of times is that, you know, an organization, they define their mandate and then they try to find ways to bring people to their mandate. Our mandate is just to show up and listen and step up to the needs and the solutions that our communities identified. And so when you look across the whole spectrum of programs that we run, in a lot of ways, it seems like there isn't much of a common thread between them, but the common thread is always that either another organization or a community member has come to us and said, we think this is the thing that we need. And we like to be the people who show up and say, yeah, we're going to make that happen. If you could go to the next slide, please. So our homelands, for those of you who are not familiar, we're on the outer central coast of British Columbia. Our territory stretches from the mainland out through outer coastal islands to open ocean. People like to talk about our territory as being remote. I guess it's geographically remote. It is the center of my universe. And, you know, our territories are often on the front lines, you know, whether it's, you know, battling old growth deforestation, fish farms, the Great Bear Rainforest agreements, fighting with DFO over the commercial herring kill fishery, the Nathan E. Stewart oil spill. There have been so many flashpoints where our territory has been the center of attention. It's been the front line that people are paying attention to. But at the end of the day, when those causes aren't trending anymore and everybody else packs up to leave, we're the people who are still here. We've always been here and we're always going to be here. And so finding ways to feel deeply secure in our role as stewards of our territory, regardless of who's standing beside us, I think has been really critical work that we've tried to undertake, recognizing that solidarity is often really fleeting and that we need to find ways to build deeper relationships so that people are living the front line the way that we do, I guess. You know, I feel really deeply that we owe it to our ancestors and to our homelands to be here in this place in a good way, and that we owe it to our youth to love them into leadership. And that is really the root of Cux's work. If you could go to the next slide, please. Bala Bala, for those of you who aren't familiar, you know, this is where we are. We don't quite have this much snow right now, but it is a beautiful sunny day. My office is overlooking the main dock. I can see seagulls and ducks in the harbor and boats going by. We are surrounded by incredible nature, and you know, as a community of about 1,500 people with gosh, I think around 250 school-age youth right now, it is just so, it's not possible to not feel connected to the territory that surrounds you. It is right there. It's all around you, and it's so beautiful. If you can go to the next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the programs that we run. We run some programs in Bala Bala that are very focused primarily on literacy and education. We run a community library. We run a lot of collaborative programs with other organizations in Bala Bala. And we do a lot of work related to food systems resiliency and bringing back ancestral medicines. So, you know, we run community gardens in Bala Bala. We're presently supporting more than a third of households in Bala Bala to grow some portion of their own produce every year. And we are finding ways to support people to access more ancestral foods and increase the proportion of ancestral foods in their diet. And if you go to the next slide, where we really shine is with our land-based programs. We run a variety of programs, including the Quay River Youth Camp, which has been part of our roster of programs since day one. The Quay Sanctuary, which is adjacent to our camp and it's a family healing center. And the SEAS program supporting emerging Aboriginal stewards, which is a sort of science enrichment program that gives youth both Indigenous science and Western science tools to learn about their territory. And when you think about our land-based programs, what we're really trying to accomplish there is reoccupying our homelands. You know, right now, all of the Muslim people who live in our territory are in what one community in Bella Bella. Pre-contact, we had more than 50 villages spread across our territory, which is 35,000 square kilometers. We don't know exactly how many Hellsick people there were pre-contact. I've heard estimates of anywhere from 10 to 40,000, but we know that at the lowest point in our census data, after waves of colonization and disease, there were 197 Hellsick people left. And so for us to be taking that deep breath in and then letting that deep breath out, it's a really beautiful thing to be able to create opportunities for youth and families and community members to exhale their way onto the territory, be out on the land again and find ways to be out there in a good way. And what I believe, and what I think our whole team at Cox really deeply believes, is that if we can make our territory a place where our community members feel safe and connected, and if we can make their cultural identity something that makes them feel really strong, the result is going to be generations of people who have an unbreakable relationship to the place they come from and to the people they come from. And my long game, I have one, is that people protect what they love. I want them to love themselves, I want them to love one another, and I want them to love the place that we came from, that our ancestors have taken care of, because I want them to take care of it for my kids and their kids. If you go to the next slide, please. We know this works. One of the hard things often about doing this kind of deep community work is that it can be hard to track your success metrics, but we've been doing it for 22 years, and we're at the place now where we're starting to see intergenerational change. And not through Cox alone, of course, because we have so many incredible partners in this community, but we come from a really activated community. We come from a community that has demonstrated time and again, through many struggles and crises and between the struggles and crises, that they are ready to practice unconditional love for our culture, for our homeland, and to root their resilience in that love. Every single thing that colonialism has tried to take away from us is still here, and we're not going to let it go. And the proof for me is being able to see second generation program participants coming, like the children of people who were the children in our programs when we got started, are now the ones who are stepping onto that boat, stepping out onto the land, showing up for our programs and growing into leadership roles in them. And that's such an incredible thing for me. If you go to the next slide, I want to share just one little anecdote that might make me cry for a warning. So far, I've never told this without crying, so just, it's okay, buckle up. We try to root our work in really strong Hellsick values of respect and reciprocity and accountability to our community. And we try to root it in our culture. You can see in these pictures, this is Kukuaus Heiksach, the first big house to be raised in our community since time before memory. We opened it in October of 2019. Sadly, did not get to use it for very long before the pandemic hit, but all of us are very much looking forward to gathering again in the kind of proximity that you can see in that second photo, to partake in ceremony together. And we spent generations gearing up for the moment of opening our own big house. We spent years working really hard to actually realize this vision. And then when it was done, we spent 5 days celebrating. And I remember a moment where I was sitting in the back and trying to take in like this incredible, overwhelming spectacle. And I looked around and realized that the people who were dancing, the people who were singing at the drum log, who were speaking into the microphone, speaking our language, sharing stories, sharing songs and history, people who were attending the dancers, serving the food, filling just about every function in that big house. When I looked around, they were all kids who had grown up in our programs. They were kids that I remember being 5, 6, 7, 8, coming out camping with us for the first time, coming out on the land with us for the first time. And to be able to see in such a beautiful, powerful moment how strong and confident they were doing that work they were doing. And to know that we had just the immense, overwhelming privilege of playing one small part in making them ready for that. That was, one of those rare moments where you know You know the work you're doing matters. You know that you're succeeding. And I hope that we can keep doing that for many generations to come. If you can go to the next slide. Just as a closing thought, I think a lot about what it is that we want to carry forward in our work, what it is that we're working toward. And, I think as a community, we realize very clearly capitalism is not going to save us. Governments are not going to save us. The real question is what's going to sustain us. And it's not anything that comes from outside of here. What's going to sustain us is unapologetic love for ourselves as Hellsick people who are survivors and descendants of survivors. It's unapologetic love for one another as, members of a community, unapologetic love for our territory that somehow, in spite of all of the assaults of colonialism, is still here and strong and beautiful and powerful and alive. And I think that what's going to sustain us too is being able to invite other people, like all of you, into that love too. Some of you may be familiar with the late HISA elder Cecil Paul, who had an analogy about a magic canoe, and I think it's an apt one to share here. And his analogy was that, this work that we have to do it's a magic canoe, and there's room for absolutely all of us to be in it, paddling together. And I think about that a lot, both when I'm literally physically out paddling in a canoe with our kids, but also as I'm thinking about how we can engage all of the people who need to be engaged in order for us here to succeed and survive and thrive. You might very fairly ask what all of this has to do with climate leadership and the climate emergency, which is the point of this panel. The answer is either that it has nothing to do with the climate or it has everything to do with the climate. But, the climate emergency is genocide. Like every other assault on our people, it is something that fractures our relationships with each other and with everything we depend on. We are, as a community, extremely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And in many ways, on my darkest days, it feels like we have so small an ability to contend with it. But what I recognize really deeply is that the climate emergency, this is our front line now. And although people have walked away from our front line for just about every other cause, every other moment that we've seen, people cannot walk away from this one, not now. People who are loved and people who feel connected are also people who feel able to be bold. And I think my takeaway is that what we need now is boldness. And if I can love people into boldness and love people into leadership, that is the kind of connectedness that I strive for in my work. And I think, at least on this very small scale of our community, our territory, we know that love works. We know that love is powerful. We can feel it coming from our ancestors and from our land. And I hope that you can feel it too. And I invite you into that really important work. Kaya Sika.